Joining us from the worldwide leader in sports, where he has done terrific work since stepping off the field in the National Football League. He spent 8 years with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He is Ryan Clark. How are you, Ryan?
Doing well. How are you, my man?
I'm doing better. We haven't spoken in a long, long time. You're doing a great job. You're doing a great job at ESPN.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
You bet. So I just want to get right into it because I know you're at the Under Armour game, right, where Mariucci is trying not to screw things up on the sidelines?
Right. Mariucci has it under control. I believe he's actually coaching my son.
Are you serious?
My son's playing in the game, so I think Steve was his coach, and Mooch is doing a great job with those guys. I'm not a big timer yet, so I'm just coaching the 8th grade game.
Okay.
Maybe one day I'll move up to that.
Fantastic. Okay, great. Let's get into the here and now, obviously, with Antonio Brown and Big Ben and Mike Tomlin. What in the world do you think is happening there right now? Because it's short.
I think this is something that has just grown over time, Rich. I think Coach Tomlin does a great job with letting players be individuals and letting players have their own personality. And I think some of that is some guys don't understand how to handle it. And, I told a story on SVP the other night, and for good, bad, or worse, or whatever people have felt, how they felt about it. But it's a true story. I'm standing in the weight room as Antonio Brown walks by on the day that he's supposed to finish his deal, and I talked to one of the strength coaches, or the head strength coach, and I say, listen, when y'all give him this money, y'all gonna create a monster. Y'all gonna have to be able to handle him. Sure enough, the next practice we go out and it's one-on-ones. Keenan Lewis is playing and he gets a little too physical and he starts to scream, I'm the franchise. You can't put your hands on me like that. He gets into it with Coach Dick LeBeau, who's a Hall of Famer, someone that Troy and I, would question or talk to in that way. And he and I almost come to blows, over that, just because I just didn't like the attitude. I didn't like the start of that. And then we've seen different things throughout his career progress and come to light publicly. And some of those things, Rich, they obviously pale in comparison to many things that's happened behind doors that people don't know. And I think just in the locker room in general, they just had enough of it. And from what I hear from talking to different people there, that situation and his growing a discontent with the team and with certain things has really worn on this team as the years progressed.
Well, Mike Tomlin, speaking to the media as you and I are talking right now, Ryan, and the question is has he lost control of this situation? I mean, you could essentially make that case viably right now. What do you think?
Well, I think he has it in control in the way that he wants to, in the way that he feels he needs to. Obviously, to me, on the outside looking in, I feel you have lost control if it comes down to costing you winning football games, if it comes down to the fabric of the locker room and where it needs to be. And obviously, you look on the other side of it, Rich, and you've been around this game forever. You know how much you understand that good players get certain leeway. And, I would venture to say that many of us believe Antonio Brown is one of the best players in the NFL. So I think it's allowed him a little latitude in the way that he's been dealt with. But I think Coach Tomlin really has to look into this situation now in the offseason and see if having Antonio Brown on that team with his production and with what he can bring to the field, if that outweighs the problems that he is causing now in the locker room and now also publicly, that these things are starting to seep into Antonio Brown, not even dressing out for games and being in a mink coat, leaving, reportedly at halftime.
Ryan Clark from ESPN here on the Rich Eisen Show, former Pittsburgh Steeler. Well, the thing that makes this a three-dimensional game of crazy chess, Ryan, is that Big Ben also has had a lot of leeway given his way, and for him to go on his radio show this week and say he doesn't know where this quote-unquote comes from about an altercation at a walkthrough that everybody who was there and is said on the record or off the record to reporters, to me, he had the ball thrown at him. So how can he sit there and say what he said and say, I welcome him with open arms when you can't tell what's going on and from who, Ryan?
Well, so here is what I'll say, the way I see the situation. Obviously, we've seen Ben at different times say things publicly about players. whether it be on the field or off the field, the way he feels about Le'Veon, the way he feels about Martavius, and different things, where he's had to bring to light some of the things we didn't know. If you look at this situation, Rich, he doesn't have to, right? Like you said, you have people, whether it's on the record or off the record, saying these things happen, right? Saying this happened to Antonio Brown. So now here's an opportunity where Ben doesn't have to be the bad guy, right? Ben doesn't have to tell us what happened because we're hearing it from different places. Ben doesn't have to say that he wouldn't welcome Antonio Brown with open arms because other people, whether it be Coach Tomlin, Kevin Colbert, the GM of the Pittsburgh Steelers, now they have to deal with this situation. So Ben gets an opportunity to be neutral, to be a leader, to protect Antonio Brown in some sort of way because everyone else is telling the story. And so for Ben to come out and say what he said, I'm not sure why. I'm sure he has a motive behind it. I'm sure he has a reason, and maybe it's because Antonio's catching so much slack and he wants to take some of that off of him. But, I think, you and I and many others believe that this altercation did happen and believe that something needs to be done, whether it's finding a way to calm Antonio, finding a way to punish him, or finding a way to shop him and get something back from him because you can't lose him the same way you lost Le'Veon Bell if you feel like he can't be a part of this team.
Well, he's asked for a trade, according to Jason Lockett-Fora, and the Steelers rarely accommodate team players that do this sort of thing. We just saw what happened with Le'Veon Bell, and as I mentioned at the top of our program, the salary cap situation, it would cost him $21 million to get rid of him, trade or cut, and it's obviously going to be a trade, and $22 million to have him. So it makes no sense to trade him essentially unless he is such a problem. So what's the out here? I mean, with Rooney, Tomlin, Big Ben, AB, what's the solution here? Do you think?
I don't when you look at the numbers, there's no feasible out, right? When you look at the numbers and you look at business, which football is, it makes more sense to keep him on the team, and I think that's what they're going to try to do. Like I said, in talking to people, football players know how to play, right? If Antonio Brown comes to play, if Antonio Brown behaves in a way in the locker room and on the field that makes him at least a decent teammate, I believe he's a guy you want. But can you make that happen? Are there pieces you can put in place if you're Coach Tomlin to ensure that that's the way that this team rolls? Because we all believe they have the talent. We all believe they have the pieces. But when you see a season like we've seen this year with so much infighting, with different people coming out in the media and exposing some things that usually aren't exposed from active players on teams, it just seems tough to me that you find an in-house solution while keeping him there. But that's going to be the challenge for Mike Tomlin. That's going to be the challenge for Ben Roethlisberger, for Antonio Brown, because this window for the Pittsburgh Steelers is currently constructed, is closing now. And do you waste time trying to get rid of Antonio Brown and rebuild, or do you keep him and figure out a way to make this relationship tenable?
And so last one for you, Ryan. Who's lost the locker room the most? Antonio Brown, Ben Roethlisberger, or Tomlin? Because there are some players that are not happy with the way that Tomlin handled last week's situation.
Yeah,
Ryan.
you know what? I would have to say it's Coach Tomlin in the sense that, and obviously, I love Coach Tomlin. I believe in everything he does. I always have. I followed everything he said. But I believe in this situation, players are waiting for him to do something to fix the Antonio Brown situation. Players are waiting for him to step in and do something that not only makes or holds Antonio accountable, but also allows him to play and help this team win games. And when you have a situation that you allow to get to this point, and then after allowing it to get to this point, you sit your best player, and that best player doesn't come out and steal the gear, doesn't come out to support the team, has on a mink coat and leaves, it shows his lack of respect for your authority. So something has to be done. Something has to be fixed. And I believe it also has to be public because this situation has become so public. So for Coach Tomlin, this is going to be a very pivotal moment in what's already been his long head coaching career at Pittsburgh.
Well, enjoy the Under Armour game, hanging out there, broadcasting it with ESPN, and then watching your son. What position does he play?
He plays corner. And he's going to ASU next year to play for Herm Edwards. So we're extremely excited about that.
Come on, that's amazing. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it worked out really well.
Okay. Well, congrats on that, Ryan. And again, don't let Mooch screw it up. I mean, he's already got it all set for your son, so don't let him screw it up.
I'll make sure to tell him you said that today.
I mean, seriously, of all the, Prime. I mean, Prime could, maybe teach him a thing or two about locking it down at that position.
Hey, Mooch, but Mooch has the head coach's experience, and that's what we're leaning on.
Excellent. Ryan, thanks for the call. Great job, as always, with ESPN, and I'd love to have you back on the show soon.
Thank you so much, Rich. Have a good one.
That's Ryan Clark of ESPN and formerly the National Football League here on The Rich Eisen Show.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.